It's a bitter day to sell balloons. Weather's been bad for a while, but today's been, well, bitter. I came downtown to, well, I booked a day off a couple of weeks ago. Didn't really know what I was going to be doing, but well, it was only right. At least it's been sunny. I had lunch in the cafe over there. Nothing much, just sandwiches. Thought about offering some to the man outside who sells the balloons, but then, well, thought better of it. He's an interesting character, the man who sells the balloons. Interesting in a minimalist sort of way, anyway. I was watching him from the cafe. I didn't want to make it look like I was staring, but I don't think anyone would have cared. He certainly wouldn't. He spends the whole time either looking at the sky or the floor, as if making eye contact with anyone forms some sort of ongoing commitment, some sort of contractual obligation. But I guess if all I had to do all day was sell balloons, my mind would be elsewhere too. He doesn't talk to them. In fact, all I've heard him say is balloon for £1, or the fascinating permutation, pound for a balloon. And he doesn't sit down, just stands there, takes their money, thrusts the balloons in their general direction so that they can choose, and then waits for them to go without saying goodbye. In the end, I had to buy one. Don't need it, obviously. I thought about letting it go a couple of times, but that would be a waste, wouldn't it? It's a shame I can't give it to one of the kids who pass by looking at it so intently as they go. It's nearly 3 o'clock. He'll be here for a while yet, I expect. Well, town's still pretty busy. Well, it's late night Christmas shopping, and he's got enough balloons to last him. I wonder if anyone's watching me. Someone in the cafe, perhaps. I wonder what they're thinking. Look at that sad bugger over there with the balloon, I expect. Cafe's still pretty busy, but then I guess it would be. It's 3 o'clock. Time for afternoon tea. That's where my mother would have been. She liked her tea. Was very fussy about her tea, less so about the cakes. As long as the cakes had some sort of icing on them, then that was good enough for her. But the tea, yes, the tea was a different story. She'd always ask if they had white sugar and fresh, full-fat milk from English cows. And the tea bags had to be one of the named brands. Well retired anyway, who couldn't assure her of their preferences. I remember many occasions where she'd hoist me up out of the chair and march me to the front of the shop, saying in her loudest voice possible how inadequate the cafe's tea-making facilities were. People used to say to me, "Doesn't she embarrass you?" And I'd say, "No, not really." And then they'd say, "Well, I suppose you get used to her." And I'd say, "No. You never get used to her, but if you were to look at the faces of the other customers who bought their tea with brown sugar and long life milk, then you'd realise that, well, they were looking at her with a mixture of pride and jealousy, that they should have been as forthright as her. They should have stood their ground. They should have fought their corner." I guess that's what made her appear so strong. I was always surprised by the amount of friends my mother had. Her tea friends, she called them. Had a rota for them and everything. She did like being in control. Was the most independent person I'd ever met. Not a bit like father. In a way, it was hard not to admire her. She always gave you the impression that she was right, and if you weren't doing something her way, then you were doing it the wrong way. I still remember the look on her face as she stood there and said to my father that he shouldn't have just gone and bought carrots because he'd felt like it, and certainly not those type of carrots. He should have consulted her first. What did he think he was doing? In fact, I can't really remember many times when they did agree, but it wasn't bickering as such, it was more, well, one side. My father, suffice to say, spent a lot of time outside, in the garden, well, in the shed, to be precise. She'd wait till he was out there and turn to me and say what a disappointment he'd been to. Quite often, she'd say to me that father wanted another child, but that she had point blank refused, because all she'd ever wanted was, well, a son. I mean, she'd say this in front of him, knowing full well that he wouldn't respond or show whatever frustration he must surely have felt. Now, don't get me wrong, I know this wasn't being nice, but she said it in a way that made it seem like it was his fault, that he deserved all this verbal abuse that she gave him. She used to call him weak. Your weak father, she'd say. I remember many times when he'd go off to the doctor with some ailment or another, and she'd just stand there on the doorstep, shaking her head and tutting and watching him ride off in that old decrepit bike he had. I mean, she, on the other hand, never got ill. I mean, she had the days when she'd lock herself in a room and Dad would say that she wasn't feeling quite herself today. But invariably, when I woke up the next morning, she'd be there, bright and breezy. As I got older, I started to look forward to those not quite herself days more and more. Whenever she had one, I'd kneel up on the bed and look out of the window at my father in the garden from behind my net curtain. I'd watch as he'd potter from the shed into the vegetable patch and back to the shed again. All the time, I'd be whispering things that I imagined she'd be saying. That hedge isn't straight. That needs weeding. It's 3 o'clock. Make me tea. I thought that was how all parents acted. She never gave me any room for my own thoughts. I remember the day that I found out that not all parents slept in separate rooms. I was at school. I overheard a friend of mine talking about his parents' bedroom, and when I asked him which parent he meant, he just looked at me for a moment and then laughed, as kids do. So that evening, after supper and before she tucked me in, I asked Mother about it. As she struck me so hard across the face, you could see the mark for days. Then she pushed me down onto the bed and walked out the room. I listened as she went down the stairs and through in the hall and into the kitchen, and then opened the back door. And I got up on my bed and looked out as she walked up to Father and struck him too as he was getting the washing in. That evening she packed her bag and left.